The Healthcare Security Cast is sponsored by 3D Network Technology. Reliability is our core value. Visit www.3dnetworktechnology.com. And by Genetec, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit genetec.com. That's GENETEC.com.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast for Tuesday, June the 23rd. Today we're joined by Bill Marcisz, and we're discussing investigations and strategic planning. You'll learn some of the tools and strategies that Bill has used at Advent Health to develop a nationally recognized security program. Now, there was a lot to cover on this topic, so we had to break this up into two parts. So this is part one. Let's get right into the content. Hope you enjoy. Today we're joined by Bill Marcisz. Bill, thanks for taking the time today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being invited to your security cast.
Oh, absolutely. You're someone who's been on my radar for a bit of time now, and I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Thank you.
Awesome. Now, I guess we'll start off the way I normally like to start off, and that's just by finding a little bit out about our guest. So if you could just answer the question for me, who is Bill Marcisz?
Well, currently I'm the Executive Director of Security, Safety, and Emergency Management for Advent Health. Advent Health is a rather large healthcare system with a national presence throughout the United States and with some businesses located outside of the United States. I am, in terms of security, I manage 18 hospitals here in the Central Florida area that fall under my direct supervision. And then I also oversee our corporate security division, which is really anything that is not a hospital. We actually have a manager who covers those facilities. And then I serve as the organization's security consultant for the remaining 32 hospitals beyond the 18 that I have directly reporting to me. So it's a large organization. Of course, it's a matrixed environment and has various different reporting pathways. So, being the senior security person here for this organization, I tend to be stretched in a lot of different directions, but it's a great organization. I'm very happy to be in this position and feel fortunate and blessed to be part of the mission and culture of Advent Health.
Excellent. And you took a kind of, I guess, unconventional path to being in the position that you're in today. Would you mind walking us through your career path and just showing us what led to you being where you are now?
Sure. And initially, when I was growing up, I was looking for a career pathway in law enforcement and ended up taking a security administration class, mainly by accident. And it kind of just shows you how an inconsequential decision can change your life. So I was in a community college in Waterbury, Connecticut, and I was looking for a class to take, an elective in between something like police supervision and criminology or whatever, and happened to see security administration parked in between the two, and I didn't feel like hanging around in between the two classes. So I ended up taking the security administration kind of on a whim. The instructor of that class, his name was Jim Gravius, and he was then the security director at Danbury Hospital in Danbury, Connecticut. And we struck up a relationship through the semester, and at the end of the term, he asked me to come work for him at Danbury Hospital as really just as a security officer, and really this I felt was a career stepping stone to becoming a police officer. And one thing led to another, and I started worked my way up the chain of command there as an assistant supervisor, and then security supervisor, and I became the chief investigator for that organization, and eventually on into a higher administrative role, and ended up staying so for 22 years, and then went back to school, finished up my bachelor's degree, and then really struck up a great relationship with a couple of professors at Western Connecticut State University, where in Danbury, where I was finishing up my bachelor's, and they convinced me to consider moving on to law school, and I ended up doing that and getting a law degree, and ended up becoming a lawyer for a while, and moved down to Florida, Central Florida, and practiced law, mainly medical malpractice defense work, all kinds of different premises cases, and pharmaceutical negligence, some employment law cases, and really just kind of progressed along that career path. But one thing that always kind of kept nagging at me is I really loved doing what I was doing before. So it's kind of interesting in a way. I spent 20 years moving in a direction to try to move out of healthcare. By coincidence, I took a law position, an attorney position, and continued along healthcare. And I really just enjoyed the hospital environment. Made a decision to try to get back into a healthcare organization as an administrator, and fell right back into my old groove here as in healthcare security, and just very happy to have made that decision. And it's worked out pretty well. It's worked out well for the organization. It's worked out well for me.
Excellent. And I'm sure just as far as your career progression goes, that you've had some mentors along the way. Who are your mentors, and what have you learned from those folks?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You should ask that question. I've early influences in my life were my parents, and then my grandfather and my dad really instilled a strong work ethic in me, and I was able to take that into adulthood and really apply it in any job that I had, and that really formed the foundation of success, looks like, at least in my career. In terms of security and healthcare and law, a great number of people. I mentioned Jim Gravius, who was my introduction into healthcare and into healthcare security. He had developed a very great security program, leap years ahead of most hospitals, and I was really fortunate to fall into that. And because I started my security career in 1982, and then started working for Jim in 1983, and it was a very sophisticated program. For back then, and Jim was big on technology and cameras and radios and things like that, stuff that a lot of organizations did not have on their security team. We even had an investigator in our department. So that was something that was Jim had a lot of foresight, and really just understood what the world of security was becoming. So and nowadays I look at several folks who are peers and mentors also. We think about the term mentor, and it's usually you envision somebody who is older than you and is that wise sage type person. But I draw a lot of my mentorship, my education. I keep an open mind, and because you never know who you're going to get your best ideas from. So nowadays I touch base with a lot of peers on the ASIS Healthcare Council. We exchange a lot of ideas, and through the International Association for Healthcare Security and Safety, I've met a lot of great people in that organization, and it's through that free flow of ideas and going out, being outgoing, and meeting folks, and being able to have somebody's phone number in your phone, and you can text somebody real quick, or hey, what are you thinking about this, or have you tried this? Do you know who's working on this type of security technology? And being able to maneuver with a lot of agility in that space so that you can get the answers you need for your organization is a critical component. So in terms of mentorship, yeah, it's an ongoing process, and a lot of folks who are leaders in our industry. I'm glad to have met them, and certainly we've helped each other along.
Great. And as far as our discussion today, it's going to go in a couple of directions actually, because obviously you have a pretty extensive background and a very robust program, and there's lots that we could potentially talk about. Just talking in terms of your program at Advent Health, would you mind sharing a little bit about the program?
Sure. So in terms of, and you really have to take a look at security in general, and in any security program. So whether you're sometimes it's just a facility director with a couple groundskeepers, and that's your security program for some rural hospital site, or whether you're a security director or manager in a large urban hospital, or a security director who has a very large healthcare system that you're in charge of. There's really 5 key components to a security program when you think about it. And the person in charge has to have some measure of skill or the ability to process these 5 functions. So, and they all work in tandem, and there's a certain synergy that you gain and return on investment in all of them. So you think about security, typically folks think of your guard force, security officers who are in uniform, patrolling, doing rounds, function posts, responding to calls, keeping the peace. So that's one function. The next function is security technology. Your cameras, your access control systems, duress systems, things along that nature. So you have that as also a piece of your security program. Communications. How do you get your service calls, and how do you keep your records and documentation? So the communications are usually either, it could be as simple as I get my calls through the operator, or we have a large security operations center and a very sophisticated security program that dispatches calls to sometimes hospitals throughout a region. Training ties everything together. You need to train your staff, your security staff, and sometimes training can also evolve to doing de-escalation training for other departments in your facilities. And then investigations. And investigations is sometimes overlooked, but I think it's a very important component, and you get so much return on investment, and if not value added, out of an investigations program. And even way back in the early 1980s, as I was telling you about my first job in healthcare security, we had an investigator, and that was just such a huge deal. And I saw the value in that in action, and so I was able, and even became the chief investigator for that organization, and was able to explore how that function can help an organization and eventually save that organization in terms of getting assets back that have been either lost or stolen, or also adding value to an organization in terms of risk mitigation and liability avoidance.
Excellent. And actually, I want to kind of focus on the one thing that you mentioned last there in terms of the investigations. So just speaking in terms of that, just talking about the different roles that you've been in, could you describe your investigations experience a little bit more?
Yes, I started off really just doing investigations as a security officer, and took a liking to it, which is great because some people don't like to do investigations. Investigations necessarily require a report, and some people just have an aversion to report writing. But for me, it never bothered me. So, it started off with just doing, simple motor vehicle investigations. Maybe the case of the missing slippers, I would track down patient property and slowly and surely evolved into more sophisticated cases, right up to doing due diligence investigations, employee embezzlement, fraud, things of that nature. So, as a security officer and as a security supervisor, you do have to do some sort of investigations. Some hospital security programs don't have an investigator, so that function falls typically to either the security manager, the security director, or the person who's probably the best at it, I guess I would say, in your department. You typically give those important assignments to somebody who has those skills to not only conduct an investigation but to perform interviews, and I don't like to use the word interrogation, but that's really a term of our criminal justice world. We all understand that interrogation means something above a simple interview, not necessarily the pictures you invoked when you watch TV of the detectives grilling or a suspect or something like that. But an interrogation is more of a sophisticated, a well thought out interview where you are looking to determine if this is the person who either has information or it possibly committed the criminal act that you're investigating. So yes, my background. I was deposed a couple of years ago, and somebody asked me that question. One of the lawyers said, "Well, how many investigations have you done or supervised?" And I went back and I added up 20 years, at least one investigation a day, and probably somewhere in the north of 10,000 investigations at some point in time throughout my career.
Wow. That being said, I know you, as part of your program, you do have some investigators. Now, your team, can you talk a little bit more about your investigations team and what type of investigations they're involved with at Advent Health?
Yeah, it's right now we staff 2 full-time investigators. One gentleman, he's a security manager, Eric Barrett. He's very skilled investigator. He came to us he was a chief of detectives in a police department here in Florida. He moved over to SeaWorld where he was their investigator, and we had a need at one point in time a few years ago, and I got to know him and interviewed him, and we brought him on here, and he's just been a real great asset to our team. And then we also have had a couple of other investigators work in and actually get promoted. Another gentleman, Nathan Wilson, was our first investigator here, and probably what I would describe as a natural investigator, someone whose skill set is just he was born to do that type of work. He's now one of our security managers in one of our hospitals here in the organization. And we have a third investigator who does a lot of video surveillance work, and it's really an art, I think, to look at video and know how to get to the place and time to save your cost in terms of leveraging the technology that is out there, and get to the point in time where you see the incident and how to view it. Not something I did when I was an investigator. Of course, we didn't have very sophisticated CCTV systems now. In fact, I remember having to sit in closets and then hardwire with coax hidden cameras into departments, and you just sit there for hours and hours and hours, and you wait for somebody to come in and do the thing that you're looking for them to do. Nowadays, we just tap right into our our camera system somewhere. Sometimes it could be halfway across the state, and then take a look and see what happened. So we're able to do a lot more today than we were back then, particularly in terms of video surveillance. One thing I will say that has changed over the years, though, and sadly, is the epidemic of workplace violence has really introduced a need for threat management. And threat management comes in the form of an investigation. So our investigators probably spend, I would say, 50% of their time dealing with employee threats or patient threats or some other type of threat that was made to our organization. And we look at video and we go into their records, do background investigations on people, and to try to determine, as part of our threat analysis, whether this person A has the ability to carry out the threat that they just made, and B, what is the likelihood that they will carry it out. So your garden variety threat, somebody's upset with your organizations. Well, I'm going to blow up your hospital at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and just you wait and see, that type of thing. And then you look there, you do your background investigation on them, and you're not seeing any type of military background or any type of schooling or anything in their criminal history that leads you to believe that they can build a bomb and then get it to the place where they can detonate it without blowing themselves up. And then see, whether they can, they have that degree of sophistication to actually plant a bomb. And then, of course, the same holds true with a firearms threat. You're determining whether they have a firearm, is there one registered, that type of thing. And then, you reach that stage, and of course, the threat becomes a little bit more apparent when somebody does have those skills, and then you have to do what we call a safety plan. And for us, that is creating a security posture around to protect our organization and the people in it. Typically, it's just one employee that we're looking to protect, or it could be an entire department, it could be the entire facility, it could be the entire organization. So we do that. Lately with COVID, I would say that the threat posture has changed a little bit. We don't have as many people in our buildings as we did 2 months ago. And what we're starting to see is a lot of cyber threats or things being done over social media, which impact our branding and reputation. So we work hand in hand with our reputation management department, and we try to ferret out these types of situations, these things that are going on in our world. Another type of thing that has now kind of become more prevalent with the COVID response is folks who are showing up at your hospitals and conducting what they call interviews with staff. And then they turn around and then they post these things on their blogs. And of course, it's like, look at this hospital, this is what they're not doing, and they put dramatic music in the background. And of course, now they have this video with your employee on it with your ID badge or insignia, and they're controlling a narrative, and they're of course they're painting your the worst possible picture, or whatever it is, that whatever political statement they're trying to make, or whatever might be motivating them to do this. So in terms of investigations, our world has changed. Back when I was doing investigations, we were primarily concerned with loss prevention, asset control measures, and instituting processes that allowed you to protect your stuff or to get your assets back. Nowadays, we've almost kind of taken a back seat. That type of investigation is not, like I said, the workplace violence epidemic has really pushed what I would call traditional investigations, and those types of calls have kind of taken a step aside to the more present reality of threats to your organization, whether they're verbalized directly or they come in the form of some sort of cyber threat or defamation of character or something along those lines.
Excellent. Now, in terms of the investigations team that you do have, I know it's one thing that a lot of hospitals would like to implement, but just don't have the resources for it. Now, I'm sure there's been some justification there that you've done either through strategic planning or even just the showing the ROI. So could you talk a little bit about that, how you're showing ROI on, I guess, both tangible and non-tangible benefits of investigations?
Sure. And the way I would explain this is that we as security directors, we're trying to add to our security programs. We're trying to, you always have to show a tangible benefit and to whatever security measure you're trying to institute. With an investigator, this is the thing to understand is that this is an ongoing recurring expense. So you have to pay your investigator salary and their benefits, and then sometimes you have to factor in equipment, hidden cameras, and things like that. So there's just not a lot of overhead in terms of operational capital costs with regards to the equipment. It's mainly the personnel. So what you have to show is the value of having an investigations program. And first you start with how much does it cost, and that's where your cost is. It's in your labor. So once you figure out what it costs, and then you start adding up, you know, what is it that the investigators can do for you that maybe your security force investigations is not doing. So with us, and what we've been able to demonstrate in terms of value is that our investigators recover anywhere from 200,000 to $500,000 a year in assets annually. So this is year in, year out. And what we're tracking, and this is what we're showing. So the 200,000 at the low end, it really covers the cost of labor and benefits and things like that. Plus, it shows a little return on investment even at 200,000. So your investigators and their salary, can be anywhere from maybe 150 to 200K a year. So with us, we're in that ballpark, and we're able to show that. But not all investigations are stolen or lost property. So that's your tangible return, and we're able to demonstrate that, hey, this is what our investigators are getting back in terms of lost and stolen property, whether it's hospital property or patient property that we would have had to maybe pay out on for a missing watch or something like that was stolen at a hospital site. So we're able to show return on investment over and above that. And then you think about added value. So what else are these investigators doing that adds value to the organization? So in our department, we work very closely with our risk management and human resources departments. They are really the investigative arm for those areas in terms of pulling video and doing the camera work, and also sometimes in the case of thefts, we are taking the leading and conducting the interviews of our employees and potential suspects in these types of theft cases or sometimes malfeasance types of scenarios, threats, workplace violence issues, things of that nature. So we help risk management out. We help administration out as well with types of things that come up. Due diligence types of claims too. Is this doctor is billing out for X amount of hours per day, and we don't think that he's doing this or she's doing this. Can we look at access control? Can we look at the cameras? Were they actually here at the hospital on this day to this day when they're stating that they're doing this and treating this patient? Is this fraudulent? That type of thing. So we aid and help in those types of cases. Going a little bit further, we talk about risk mitigation and what I call liability avoidance. So just take your common slip and fall type of scenario. We get somebody says, yeah, I fell down in your main lobby, on such and such date. And then typically what happens is, a security officer will be the initial contact person. They'll write up a report. Yes, Joe Jones states he slipped and fell in the lobby. But I didn't see anything on the floor. that could have caused them to fall. And 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 then our investigator might take that case, they'll look into it, and they'll say, hey, wait a minute, this guy didn't fall down at all. He just kind of put himself on the ground, lowered himself down to the ground, waited for somebody to come by, and then grabbed his knee and started saying, "Oh, I fell down here," you know, you laugh, but I tell you, at least a couple times a year, this happens in our organization. We catch these people making fraudulent claims, and you get the demand letter from the lawyer saying how egregious you were to allow this dangerous condition to exist, blah blah blah. But for about $1 million, we won't have to litigate this case. And then you show them the video, and okay, we're going to drop that. So, what you're saving there now, if you didn't have an investigator, if you didn't have the video, it generally takes about $50,000 to litigate a very simple case. So that's your defense cost. You're paying your lawyer to work through all the depositions, the discovery requests, and reviewing medical records and all that. And then you have to go to trial, and there's a trial cost. And then what happens if you lose the case? And then you got to pay out a verdict. So having that investigator at a minimum, a couple times a year, where we prove that this injury just didn't happen the way you said it did, we're saving maybe 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 in what I call litigation avoidance. Now, risk mitigation is another strategy and another justification. We had a couple of years ago, we had a case where for whatever reason, this lab driver decided not to do his job, didn't turn over some samples at the end of the day, and unfortunately, these samples were something that or blood work and things like that, and were taken from surgeries. And long story short is our investigators helped the risk management team, and we were able to see where this guy went. We tracked him. We knew he had the stuff the last place he was at, and as it ended up, the delivery guy just got lazy. He just didn't want to drop the stuff off on his last run for whatever reason. He left them in his garage, and the totality of all those samples that we're taking, biopsies and surgical procedures, we were looking at probably about a $15 million liability altogether, if you calculated them all up. And by staying on this guy and being able and having all this video evidence and going back and interviewing him, he finally caved. We got the samples back, and they were all still good, believe it or not. And we were able to. So that was one case that saved the organization about $15 million in liability. So,
wow.
In terms of, and then the way I used to sell it way back when was just having an investigator on your staff can serve as a deterrent to folks in your workforce, because word gets around, especially the people who are prone to steal. You hear, oh my God, the security department, they catch people all the time. It might give them pause to think twice about taking something and causing that loss to the organization. So there's a lot of different ways to sell it, but I strongly recommend at least one investigator for a mid to large size hospital, because you're going to make that investment back, and it'll pay dividends for you in most cases beyond. So in our department, the investigations division is really a very important part of not only the security program, but also through the years, our investigators have been almost indispensable for our strategic partners in our organization in terms of our risk management team and our human resources and our administration.
Excellent. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about strategic planning as well. So I know your program, like I said, is pretty robust. You guys have the body cameras. You have some canines with your unit. Could you talk a little bit about some of those features that are not necessarily commonplace in all hospitals? And then I guess from there, we'll break off into strategic planning a bit.
Sure. So a little bit about, we talked about mentorship earlier, and one thing that I got from a lot of folks, especially early on, was be open-minded and think progressively. And leveraging technology is, I used to be afraid of technology, and now I am just such a believer in some of the things that we can do with technology. And it really, if you can understand it and then understand the applications and where it can take you, um, you're going to develop a very good security program. And so I use that as part of my strategic planning. So I know, I'm going back to my days at Danbury Hospital, just to tell you how progressive the leadership was there. We were the fourth hospital in the country to institute infant alarm systems. I mean, this is, and that wasn't all that long ago. I mean, now everybody has a hug system or something akin to that in their maternity or mother baby type of place in their hospital. And then we were one of the first hospitals to also institute and acquire what I call personal alarm devices, or the duress buttons that clinical or other folks who are at high risk carry around with them. The technology was so new back then. We're using RF systems, and we actually had to put in all the RF transponders and everything like that just to put in the system itself, because that it just didn't exist for any other application anywhere in healthcare at that point in time. At Advent Health, I was really lucky to have an administration here that was willing to listen and understand the development of a security program. Initially, just before I got here, the team was looking at license plate recognition, and that was that was one of the first things when I got here. I was able to learn more about license plate recognition, and of course, I was all in at that point when they offered me the job. Once I heard that we were putting something like that in, just the benefits and the value to that are phenomenal from an investigative standpoint and from a threat management standpoint, to be able to pick up on somebody's license plate who may be threatening one of our employees, and get that and have that signal to our security operations center, and be able to meet this person as they get to the door and ask them, "Hey, what are you doing here?" That in and of itself is pretty amazing. But the other types of technology we looked at were, we acquired a very sophisticated computer-aided dispatch and records management system. Records management, another thing that is often overlooked in security. You got to have it. I mean, you got to have the data to support everything that you are trying to accomplish as a security director. So if you can demonstrate value in what's going on in your organization in terms of security matters, then you're ahead of the game. And then you can start looking at, well, I have X amount of crimes occurring here, and I have to watch this many patients, and this is how many workplace violence incidents we deal with. It's very critical to have that type of system. And we have such a large organization here, we were able to make a case for a very sophisticated system. So I won't go into any names because I don't want to plug anybody, but here we also did body cameras very early on. And this evolved out of a discussion I had with our vice president of risk management when I first started working here. We were having so many patient complaints against security staff for excessive force, and we would spend all this time investigating those things, and of course it's not true, well, 95% of the time it's not true. And we got to talk. She wanted, I remember at the time she made a suggestion about maybe putting cameras in all the treatment rooms and all the emergency departments. I said, well, I don't know if we can do that or not. But I said, body cameras are things police officers use, and they travel with you to the event. So there's no need to worry about patient privacy and things like that you would have with a CCTV setup in a patient room. And the more we looked into it, the more we thought it would be a good idea. And I actually just wrote a paper on it, not a paper, but it's an article that was published in the last IHOS Protection Journal. It goes over the legal issues that a body camera presents in a healthcare environment, and I wrote it basically for security directors, because this is something that this is an article that you can now take to your legal team, your risk management team, your administrator, because what we've done is we have highlighted all the various legal issues, or the most common ones, and we explain in the article how to overcome HIPAA constraints, and this is something that we worked on for 18 months, a policy. It took 18 months just to get to yes on the body cameras, but then we had to write a policy, and that took another 18 months, and we vetted it through 3 different legal teams, and we were finally able to come up with a product and deploy the body cameras in our hospital. The reason why it took so long is it isn't so much the video aspect of it, it's the audio portion. And I guess everybody's going to go back to their CPP study class, and you're going to learn about the wiretapping laws, because they generally don't come up all that often elsewhere. But I remember that the wiretapping laws, because there you learn that there's 2 types of law, or 2 types of states. One is a single party consent state, where only one party needs to consent to having a audio conversation recorded. But there's 11 states out there, and Florida being one of them, that where you have to have a 2-party consent on the for the audio recording, and that presents a huge hurdle for body cameras. So there's if you give adequate notice then of the recording, then you can then you can record, and all of this is spelled out in that article. So I would, if you're thinking about body cameras and you're having difficulty articulating how this is perfectly okay in a healthcare setting, I would say, give that article a quick read. It's unfortunately it's long, and it's very boring, and it's really written for an audience of lawyers and risk managers, and but it does give you as a security director a way to make that case for body cameras in your security program, and I say that because it's a lot of security directors have a hard time understanding the legal concepts, and it's hard to explain this to an administrator who's holding the purse strings, by the way, how this is not a HIPAA violation to record. And so it's really designed to help you overcome those barriers. And again, there's a lot more to it, but I'm certainly willing to help people with body cameras. And but in terms of strategic planning, one thing I learned early on from one of my mentors is that you have to have the ability to strike while the iron is hot. So think about having a security plan on your shelf, updated and ready to go for when your organization has an adverse event or something occurs in your community, like maybe an active shooter scenario. And then you can, hopefully you've already socialized this with your immediate upline leadership, so that the next time they want to hear about your thoughts about upgrading security in the organization, you already have this thing ready to go. Say, hey, oh, by the way, here, let me send you our strategic plan for security. So your strategic plan should be thought about in a couple different ways. So think about the 5 areas of security again: operations, technology, communications, training, and investigations. Have a plan fitting into all of those 5 categories. So what do you want to do? How do you want to advance your program along those 5 branches? And have it go out and get estimates on how much technology costs, or have it figured out how much it would cost to add an investigator, and how many dispatchers do you need? Whatever it is that you're trying to do, have it researched, and then have it in a nice little document ready to go. you will find that if you have that degree of planning set up, then you will find that you have unintentionally created confidence in your leadership, in your security and administrative skill set, that they're going to be impressed that you have this to go. So I spent probably a year, my first year here at it was Florida Hospital at that time, developing a strategic plan for all of our hospitals here and what that looked like. And so a couple of, it was about last year this time, our senior vice president, actually a senior executive officer for our organization, asked me to put together a presentation on security for, he was doing a presentation to other hospital leaders. And one of the slides was to set the stage on, what did security look like 5 years ago and what does it look like now? And I really didn't understand the scope of how far we had gone as a team until I looked back and started, okay, we had X amount of personnel then, now we have this many. So we started off with 122 FTEs and now we're at about 250. And then our budget started at, it was in the high 3 million range, and now we're at 12 million plus. So we've grown in staff, we have grown in terms of personnel, we have added $6 million in security infrastructure to our organization. We had 6 different camera systems that were, a couple of them were absolute junk. And then we migrated down to a very sophisticated CCTV platform and duress systems and things like that we implemented. As we mentioned, LPR, license plate recognition, things of that nature is part of our security footprint now. So it made for a pretty good slide, a good story to tell in terms of, hey, we had a good security program before, but now it's really good because we're able to do so much more, and we have so much more command presence out there. We implemented defensive tools up to Taser. We're now looking at armed security. We have, like I said, in addition to folks who lead up all these 5 divisions, so our technology folks, they are PSPs through ASIS. Everybody is certified to the highest degree. Our investigators are certified through ASIS as well. Nearly all of our security managers are now CHPAs through the International Association for Healthcare Security and Safety. Not that it's a job requirement, but it's a huge part of our development, and part of the strategic plan is developing our culture to get to that can-do attitude. That nothing that we want to do can't be done if we put our collective minds to it. We're able to accomplish great things. So, and it's through a lot of hard work. We have policies and procedures where we didn't have them before. It's that level of commitment that has led to a very robust, as you say, security program. But nothing is better than receiving peer recognition, and we were very happy to be the recipients of the Lindbergh Bell Award through IHOS last year, as it was quite the achievement. So, but again, it's part of our work ethic, and when I was developing that slide, we didn't work 6 years to develop this program for that slide. We did it because it was the right thing to do. We didn't certify our entire security workforce, because we were looking to win an award. We did it because that was the right thing to do. And it's success is really just a mere byproduct of hard work, and I kind of use that as one of our our mantras here, and also the 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 good is the enemy of great. So don't be complacent. Just and strategic planning is part of that. And one failing I see over and over again, not only as a security director, but also as a security consultant. I do consulting on the side. And one thing I see over and over and over, the number one mistake security managers and directors are making is that they don't have a plan. They haven't socialize this with their leadership, or they're not speaking the language of the healthcare administrator. They may speak fluent police lieutenant, but you know that doesn't translate well to hospital administrators sometimes. What they're interested in is efficiency ratings and metrics and cost benefit ratios and strategically stating a value on the dollar spent in your security program, and those are those are the those are the things that you really don't like doing because it's really boring to sit down there and develop stats and things like that. But that is the lifeblood of your security program, and that's where you should be focusing on. I know that there are imminent things that are on your agenda on a day-to-day basis, and that the current day crises are really occupy a lot of your time. However, you sit back, spend about an hour each day doing research on technology that is out there and looking at your stats, seeing how you can shave a dollar here or add a dollar there, and making sure that that dollar is well spent. That is how you develop the program. So and I say this because the strategic plan I wrote, it took an entire year, and I wish I could show it to you. It's in a 4-inch ring binder, and it covers all of these items, all the technology things, and how they add value. And I researched how much it cost. And this strategic plan was gaining a lot of traction in our organization. And unfortunately, on June 12, 2016, we had the Pulse nightclub shooting here in Orlando. And the one thing that impressed my organization, and we did end up treating some of the victims here in our hospitals, and we had an onslaught of media and government officials coming here and photo ops and threats to our organization. It's unbelievable how the crazies come out of the woodwork during these types of events. It's sad, but you also see the best in society during these events as well. But the one thing that was happening is when you have a mass shooting or a bombing, any security director who's had these types of events happen in your community, is that it really impacts the psyche of your workforce. And these are the folks who work in your hospital, and they become afraid, and you're dealing with a state of mass fear. So in a lot of ways, our jobs have, like I said, we've moved away from doing investigations to doing threat management. As security directors, we have gotten away from securing our facilities because we spend all our time managing fear. Healthcare workers it's because of the workplace violence, but also because of the uptick in these tragic events. And then, of course, social media just kind of fans those flames, so to speak, and we spend a lot of time just trying to make our staff feel safe, and so that they can do their job without having to worry about getting shot. That's a lot of what we do. But our strategic plan was designed with this in mind. So after the Pulse shooting, a couple of weeks later down the road, you're seeing stories popping up. Well, this hospital is instituting an armed security program, and that one is doing metal detectors and X-ray machines. And I'm not saying that's not the right thing to do, but if it's part of your strategic plan anyways, then yes, you've researched it. Then it's not a knee-jerk reaction to placate whatever media coverage that you're trying to get over at that point in time. And this is where I give our administration here a lot of credit. They weren't going to do that. They could have easily said, "Hey, Bill, here's $1 million. Go arm our team, because this is what we want to do." And we've done our assessments, and we feel there is a place for armed security, but it's not exactly what we want to do for en masse. We have strategically looked at all these various different defense mechanisms to harden our soft target hospitals. So we have a plan ready to go for this when the time is right for our organization. But I had worked an entire year on this plan, and it was so sophisticated that my immediate boss, I was reporting to the senior finance officer at that point in time. He brought us in to do a presentation to our C-suite. They gave me an hour. They kept me there too, and we went over every element of the strategic plan. Now they didn't say here's a blank check. Go ahead and this is all good. Our leadership team took all of these recommendations and vetted them. And because I had done all the research and showed the numbers, and my plan, our plan here in the security program met the branding and the culture of our organization. We're a faith-based organization. We met all that criteria, so that wasn't something that needed to be overcome. But they took each and every one of these items, and over a 6-week period of time, we met and talked about every single one of these things, and they came back and they said yes to almost everything I had asked for. And again, that equated to a $6 million add to security to our organization overall. So, like I said, it's strategic planning. You want to make sure you have a plan on your shelf. I mean, I have several right now that address certain items and certain contingencies in the future, because you never know when that next adverse incident is going to occur in your facility that's going to require that security measure that you had already vetted out, and you want to be able to speak competently and intelligently to that situation and apply your solution to that in a very competent way. And the only way you can do that is to be prepared. So that's why I say strategic planning is so important. And in fact, my consulting firm, when I was looking to name it, I wanted it to say something, that really captured the essence of how I go about evaluating security in different places. And strategic was the one word that really encapsulated everything. So I named my business Strategic Security Management Consulting. I know it sounds pretty dry, but like everything else, it was very well thought out. And there's a reason why it's named that. There's a reason why things are in my strategic plans, and there's a rationale, and there's a rational basis for it, and there's a cost that attaches to it. So that is why I say strategic planning is probably one of the most important things we can do as security professionals. And it doesn't matter if you have a small rural hospital with maybe a half a dozen security officers, or you are a vice president or chief security officer for a large hospital, healthcare organization, or corporation. In some way, shape, or form, there is some element of planning that you need to account for and be ready. Otherwise, you're not doing a service for your organization.
Excellent. Now, as far as strategic planning is concerned, generally, how far in advance do you like to plan, and how frequently are you updating that? Is that kind of as needed, or do you just really set aside time that you're going to update those plans?
Yeah, that's a good question. In most cases, folks will do a 1, 3, 5 year outlook, and they'll sketch it out in those terms. What I like to do is I like to I'll take a few minutes and either draft or I will add to an ongoing white paper that I have already begun writing. This way I'm writing my thoughts down in real time as I'm addressing a situation, and so that everything is fresh in my head, and then I can go back to it. Sometimes it's months, sometimes it's even a year or two later. I'm pulling that paper off the shelf, and I'm trying to rationalize, or sometimes you have to write a paper that is trying to counter the position that someone might want to add a certain type of security measure that you disagree with. So, you have to look at both the good and bad, obviously. And just remember, when you institute a security measure, it's really hard to take that measure off the table. So for example, I mean, if you have infant alarm systems right now, and most places do, if for some reason your organization reached a point in time where you have to start eliminating services or functions, it gets real hard to eliminate something like that, or a metal detector, or defensive tools from your security officers, because sure enough, Murphy's Law will shine through, and that adverse incident will be as a result of that security measure, or it could be contributory to that event occurring. So if an infant were able to be abducted from your hospital as a result of you not having that infant alarm system, you don't want to be penny wise and dollar foolish in your decisions in your security platform. So, but adding a security measure that really makes no sense, just to have it, if there's nothing really to be gained by it, and then you take that out, and then something happens, well, you shouldn't have had it there to begin with. So that's something you want to try to avoid at all costs as well. So yes, that's the way I do it. I know some folks just like to do a straight up plan and that's it, but I have several different things in the works at all given times, because if you have one big plan and they're just looking for, say, I would like you to look at X-ray machines, you don't want to give them your whole plan. You just want to give them a one-page paper on that particular security measure. And that's another thing. If I've talked about speaking the administrator's language in their code. One thing I've learned is that one page. You need a very quick executive, high-level summary. This is what I'm recommending. This is what it does. Here's the pros. Here's the cons. Here's how much it costs. Boom. So have that, but then also the rest of your white paper goes into the why and the explanations. So just don't hand a 10-page paper and expect your administrator to read it. They just don't have the time. So just have that one-page executive summary, and then you could have the full body of the report ready to go in back of that.
And this concludes another episode of the Healthcare Security Cast. Join us on the next episode where we conclude our interview with Bill Marcisz. Just a reminder to engage with the Healthcare Security Cast on social media. We have a LinkedIn page that you can follow, a LinkedIn group that you can join to participate, a Facebook page and group as well. Also, we have a new Twitter account, which is @HCSecurityCast, a new Instagram account, which is @TheHealthcareSecurityCast, and a new TikTok page, which is @healthcare_security_cast. Also, you can go to brianhamilton.com for connections to all of these sites. And feel free to connect with me as well. My name again is Brian, B-R-I-N-E, Hamilton. and I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as well. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay safe and take care.